Well, welcome back, Unslaved. So good to be back with you. And we have the return of Caleb with us, who has a fascinating subject to cover, getting into the work, revisiting the work of the great Ted Gunderson, and an interesting interview that he had done. I think this was early, mid 2000s, definitely after 9/11. The interview, we'll put the links below for everybody to check out. You have to see it. It's two parts. It's called Hidden Timelines of Secret Societies, getting into the Masons, Skull and Bones, and this mysterious mathematical code that this gentleman found out. The man's name is Bob Fischer. We're not sure what happened to the guy. He did these interviews and then we're not sure where he went, but Caleb's been really diving into this to try to find this information. We got some slides, we got some stuff to drop your way. So this is going to be fascinating. I can't wait. I've had nothing but love and respect for Ted Gunderson's work for many years, included him in my films, and so just monumental stuff. And these are fascinating subjects that are related to so much of what we've been talking about on Enslaved as of late, and also it's very relevant to what's going on in the world today. So this will be great. So good to see you, Michael. Good to see you, Caleb. Caleb, welcome back to Enslaved. Good to have you as always.
It's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Michael, over to you for just a quick little introduction to get things started.
Yeah, thanks. We had a lot of shuffling around to get Caleb on. It always seems to happen when we're dealing with Caleb, but it's so good because when he contacted me about this, I said, right, you're next. Can't just wait on this. And so glad that you did. And, I thought being a big fan of Ted Gunderson, had seen everything that the man had produced. And I was wrong. The video and is about 4 or 5 hours split into two, but I had never seen that. And I'm into numerology and symbolism, right? Especially if it's Masonic of all things. We're thinking here of Scott Onstott and all sorts of and as you say in the early 2000s, because this came in 2004, 2006, it looked like that this was made. There was a slew of videos. It was the early days of YouTube, and you did get a lot of these videos that were dealing with the symbolism all over the place. So Bob Fischer's work may have been snowed under even prior to that period. In the late 90s, you're getting books coming out like Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital, a book we all know. And I don't know if the members know. Maybe we can link up to that book by David Oveson, which is one of the most extraordinary, excuse me, I've got a bad cough. One of the most extraordinary books on sacred geometry in regards Washington, D.C. The man also deals with zodiac symbolism, just like Bob Fischer does. So I don't know if that sort of intimidated Bob Fischer. I don't think so, because David Oveson's book came out before Bob Fischer appeared. So I don't think it was that. It's just that, where did the guy go, right? And where did this gem of a video go? So fantastic when just a few days ago, Caleb sent that, and I thought, right, that's it. We have to have you on right away. This opens a lot of doors. We'll post it below for members. They need to download it because you know what YouTube's like. I guess, Caleb, maybe if you haven't downloaded it yourself, we still encourage members to do that. Caleb, and I must also then mention that I did meet Ted Gunderson, and that's why we wanted to feature him at any given time, because this man is authentic. In my own journey through the movement of alternative research and self-actualization movement, I met, pretty much everybody, but that doesn't mean I liked everybody. And in fact, at the end of the day, the ones that I thought were really genuine, very, very few indeed. Ted Gunderson is one of those guys. He is the real McCoy. We talked, on several occasions, and he was top of the line. And he showed genuine interest when I told him that from the time of the 70s and 80s, I'd been into these satanic cults. Because when we were at conferences, he goes, "So what's your talk about?" And I said, well, forget about that. That talk I'm doing here to the public is not, the focus of my main interest. Say it was something like Atlantis. What I said is, love that subject, but no. Hey, man, I've always wanted to talk to you because I want to let you know what I've really been researching, and it's what you've been into. So we really got on. I start talking about, the process church and David Berkowitz, things, books in which he'd been mentioned, your Dave McGowan's and all this. And so he was like, whoa, We really got on there. And then he started opening up about, the horrors that he had happen to him in his own private life. And by the way, in this video, for people who watched it part one, he actually opens up a bit too and lets people know the kind of horrors that he experienced, when he broke the consensus. Just like if anyone's watched that movie, Brotherhood of the Bell, they'll know what happens to you when you break the silence and how you're ostracized and basically ruined, So here's a man of the highest integrity. Other people may know him from, the work he did with Bryce Taylor and Kathy O'Brien and that kind of thing. And great. That's great. I wanted to ask Caleb, how did you find this video? You certainly knew about Ted Gunderson before, right?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how I found it. It was a long time ago. And I ever since the first time I watched it, it was something that fascinated me, and periodically over the years I'll go back and watch it again. And at certain points in time I took copious amounts of notes from the interview, because there's a lot that you could miss, because it's a very fast moving uh, thing, and there's a lot of detail in it. In fact, the slides that he shares, he doesn't read the entire text of the slide, and the slides themselves are really blurry. I actually made a project of writing those down, and it was difficult just to even read the text on the slides. The video itself was recorded uh, in February of 2006. So even back in those days, they were um, using like the old-fashioned video cameras and videotaping the computer screen. It was very primitive. So, as you say, it was sort of like a one-time thing. Um, they had this interview that they recorded, and then you never heard from Bob anymore after that. I imagine that he just wanted to share the information and then just leave it at that. Um, we'll link the interview below. Uh, it's highly recommended to check out. Um, but yeah, it was fascinating to me. I like the way he thinks and he explains things and words things. And even when it comes to the secret society history, uh, like the history of the Masons and everything, he even said himself in the interview that he had only been into it for 8 months, as far as knowing about the history of secret societies and all that. So it's not super duper deep as far as his understanding of it. But for someone who's only been looking into it 8 months, uh, it was pretty good. And I like the way that he worded it and explained it. So in a big way, I just really enjoy listening to him, because I like the way he explains things and everything. So I
Yeah.
am kind of disappointed that he never uh, showed back up again to do anything else, but it's understandable.
Yeah. It's sad also that because it was a little old school in the videography, which it would have been nice had he done it himself. He was technically oriented. So getting Ted as a host, perfect. That's one step towards fame. You want somebody with a credibility. I nearly would have cringed if he had somebody else. So having Ted Gunderson be the host, that's top notch, actually. He couldn't have done better than that, even if he had gone with somebody like, say, Anthony J. Hilder or whatever, But the thing is, you see that, yes, it's pity that he then disappeared, because Ted, Anthony, they knew some pretty, at this exact period, I'm thinking they were already in touch with various actors and Gary Busey and other people within Hollywood. They interviewed them. And so had they, it's amazing when you see that. And then you find out that somebody like Bob Fischer's work, they're not honing in on it. It's like, okay, you sit there bantering about 9/11 on a video, and it's all very entertaining and everything. But here in your midst is a guy with the deepest occult research. Where the hell are the heavyweights, the Hollywood voices? And they were, as I say, they perked up at that time. There's many of them. And yet, there was no coalescence, he didn't reach out himself to people like that. And he didn't get that, and again, of course, he explains why. Later on, he tells you that he was intimidated. And I also thought that it was very honest of him, to admit his naivety. When you said that he admitted openly, honestly, that he had only been into it for a couple of months and didn't have quite that occult background to know the meaning of the correspondences, he still did a bloody good job because he was into astrotheology. He was in at least to the basic astronomy and astrology that is one of the great keys of decipherment. And he at least had that. And that's not a little thing, that's a lot. But one would have hoped then, as time went by in his life, he get into different other things, but and gained exposure, with these actors and other celebrities, getting behind him. So none of this actually happened. And then again, on top of that, his naivety, which he admits openly, that when he made his first report, he starts sending it to all the alphabet agencies of the government. No one in their right fucking mind would do that. But he admits that he did. And he says, I was a fool, and he learned the hard way. And it brought upon him very, very great tribulation. But to admit this, somebody wouldn't have to admit that. They could have just left that out in order to look all, smart and heroic. No, he tells you how the fucking naive he was and the danger he put his family in and everything. So I thought that was very credible and honest. Not everybody in the wide world would admit that.
Well, one thing I noticed too that was really good was within the first 20 minutes or so of the interview, he gets right into the history of the Templars and getting in literally to what we've been discussing, which is at that time in history when the Templars went over to Jerusalem in the Middle East, they started to form these relationships with these Eastern groups that were there. And this is where you start bringing in that whole thread. And he's just opening right up in the deep end. So if he's only 8 months in, and he's already at that level to identify that level of this whole hierarchy, man, that's exemplary. He also mentioned a book that I have right here. He mentioned this book, The Freemasonry and the Birth of Modern Science by Robert Lomas. I picked this up in a used bookstore years ago. Haven't read it all, but now I'm going to be diving in because this kind of gets into this mathematical code that apparently the Templars adopted from these mystical groups, if I'm not mistaken, Caleb.
Yeah. So the mathematical code, he believes that the Templars picked it up during the time of the Crusades when they went over there during the Crusades. And he explains all of that. Well, and yeah, he was only into it for 8 months as far as even reading about the Templars or any of that kind of thing. I'll fill in more of the backstory in a moment, but just to comment on the Templar thing, his best guess was that when they went on the crusade to the east, they sort of adopted a mathematical system which the Muslims had been using or had been the custodians of, originating back to Solomon's temple and all of that stuff. That's sort of like the well-known trope in Templar history. But all these years later, we know a bit more. What does Ralph Ellis bring to the fore is the fact that the first place that the Crusaders went was Edessa. They went to Edessa first before they went to Jerusalem. And the Edessan royalty from the Roman Empire days, they were the ones